Hello, welcome to another one of our Digital Marketing Answered episodes. I'm joined today with Pete Hibbard, Operations Director at Innovation Visual. And we wanted to do a quick one today. We've had quite a few really good, successful new website launches. Rebuilds for people. Really good outcomes. Rather than talking about what goes wrong with web builds, I want to drill into why or how you make web builds successful. And you've been leading a lot of these web builds from Innovation Visual side. So yeah, let's talk about that. Let's talk about the start. How do you start a project that's going to lead to a successful website build?
I think before you even touch the project, that's probably the most key part. The pre-build, getting everything in line, getting everything planned out. That's one of the, I think, really sets you up for success. If you don't do any of that, you are destined for failure. And that's one of the things we've learned over the years. You've got to get that right, and that involves all the stakeholders. So you got.
So what is pre-build?
So you're first and foremost, why are we building this website?
The goals
for us, exactly. The objectives. What are the objectives? What if it's the client? For us, or if you are the client, why are we doing this? What's the purpose? What are the outcomes we're looking to achieve? And then that needs to inform the whole process. And so everybody, the devs, the designers, the project managers, the account managers, anyone involved in this process needs to be clear on why we're doing it and what we're trying to achieve. And getting that documented and everybody literally on the same page is key to the start of a really successful build.
And you said you've got to get all the stakeholders involved. What does that typically look like in kind of the sort of mid-sized, more complicated organisations that we work with? Who are the stakeholders that need to be in the room?
Predominantly for us it will be a marketing manager or director. That's key. It depends on are they providing some design elements, because they may well have in-house design provisions, so that they need to be involved. Equally, if we're doing the design, our design needs to be involved. On the client side again. A CTO potentially, a tech guy, because the other thing is, and this is another key part of the pre-build, is choosing the right technology, and that's got to work for them. We can't just go wading in with our ideas and this is the system we're going to use, because there's a myriad of CMS, content management systems we can use. What's the best fit, which fits with their tech stack, etc., etc. So on their side, the marketing
team leadership.
Is the
and you'd bring some of the people below that sort of senior marketing leadership into there as well.
Anybody who's going to be involved in the project absolutely has to be involved, because they've got to have an understanding of what's going on. You can't bring them in halfway through the build blind into this project. That's going to end in failure or cause problems. So it's really important that they get the. And we're joined by Poppy.
We're joined by the dog who's come in to talk
She's a
about
key
web.
stakeholder. That's that. Anything to add to Pop? No.
Okay. So in the pre-build process, it's getting the people in there, setting the objectives, understanding that, and then from that understanding,
choosing the right technology, understanding what we are going to be building on, and then understanding who we need involved from our side in order to achieve that.
Okay, and then how do you then start defining what you're going to build, what you're going to design?
So from our point of view, we'll always be kind of led predominantly by an SEO angle, quite often. So understanding, doing keyword research, understanding the user journey on the site, and defining that and understanding.
So that's the CRO aspects as well as the SEO aspects.
Absolutely.
User journeys.
User journeys on site, mapping that out, and defining an information architecture. Now, again, it depends on, are we migrating from an existing site? Predominantly we are, because most people have websites. Unless it's a new business or a
we're not often working with startups.
No. So predominantly, we are taking an existing site, but what are we doing? Are we literally migrating wholesale, or are we looking to identify the issues with the current site and improve? And more often than not, that's why we're doing it. So again, going back to objectives, we're looking at what we're trying to achieve. And so scoping out, in that pre-build phase, scoping out what that looks like and what we are trying to achieve from an SEO perspective, from a user journey perspective, a UX perspective, and all of that then needs to factor into the design of the site. And so that leads me on to my next point, really, in terms of clear briefing. That's got to be the other thing in that pre-build stage.
Yeah.
And it's not one brief that's just, well, that's the brief for everyone to agree on. The design brief, that's a brief in itself.
Yeah.
The dev brief is a whole separate thing, because what you're looking to get from those two parties are different. There's a lot of similarities, obviously, but there are some key differences, and we've got to get that right. And you've got, again, set yourself up for success. So, thinking from a design perspective, we've mentioned UX, user journey, all of those sort of elements, but also accessibility is becoming a real thing, thinking about how that is going to work. Responsiveness, obviously, mobile.
Mobile
thinking
first.
the whole thing.
Exactly.
And depending on the client, they will have different objectives in terms of perhaps which is more important for them. So mobile first predominantly is a really important thing. So getting all of that in, getting those briefs clearly defined, agreed with, again, all the stakeholders.
So just on something like the brief for the designer, like, would you do wireframes, or is that so? Where does that appear in the process?
Something we've tended to do is wireframes and black and white. So don't get influenced by the color or your eyes distracted by other things, images, etc. Just clear, plain wireframe, black and white, just to get that structure in place is a good start point. Not for every single page, but for a lot of the key pages that are on that site. So yes, wireframing, that early stage, and then obviously starting to bring in sort of visual design as part of that process.
Right. Well, that visual design's coming really late, and interestingly, I've seen some shocking behaviour, in my mind, shocking behaviours from other agencies that have gone to pitches with a presentation of the design to what the client should see, even before they've won the business, which I find mind-blowingly assumptive, and how anybody could, if you're buying on how it looks when an agency is presenting, you don't understand how to build success on that. Okay, so lots of planning, lots of clarity here. Lots of documentation I'm hearing from you as well. It's all getting written down. And is that going around for sign off and things like that, making sure it's getting approved?
Absolutely. And biggest of all, I suppose, the Gantt chart, the timeline, getting that in place and getting that agreed, because that's going to be a key part of, again, a successful build. We've got to have those milestones in place, and setting those out and getting the agreement, who's available when, getting the resource in place, getting agreement with the client when they can, because quite often the client has to be, has to be very involved in terms of the provision of things and being available to sign things off, et cetera, et cetera. It has to fit with their timeline, their schedule. So getting all that in place before we've even started looking at actually building a website, this is all that stuff that's pre-built. So getting all of that stuff, and then a kickoff meeting, before we actually then start the process, bring all that together, a kick-off meeting.
Okay. Interesting.
A kick-off meeting.
So there's the initial kick-off meeting where you get everybody in the room, and then you've got another kick-off, which is the kick-off of actually end of planning. It's kicking off now we're gonna tell you, now we're gonna create the look, and we're gonna bring it to life. Brilliant. Okay, so there's actually two kick-off points. That's how seriously you're taking this pre-planning and planning phase. Okay. And then, so assume we've had this kick-off meeting. Everybody's in alignment with all the documentation and what's been agreed. So then, in terms of how you ensure success, just touch on the design a little bit in terms of, like, I suppose it's actually relatively straightforward, isn't it? Because you've done all the user journey of the wireframe. Should be quite easy, shouldn't it?
Well, pretty much, and getting that agreement with the client and making sure that everybody is aligned with what we're trying to achieve, and that the design is doing that. And like I said, things like accessibility. So it's buttons and positioning of all those sort of things, and making sure that we are designing a site that is future-proof and that it's going to be fit for purpose.
Would it be fair to say? And I'm just jumping ahead here. Would it be fair to say, though, that the designers prefer working like this because they get to spend more of their time making it look amazing and making it look great because you've given them such clarity?
Yeah, Yeah. Well, I suppose you have to ask them. But yes, I think so.
But is that the feedback?
Yeah, my feedback and my
Yeah.
feeling is that from the feedback I'm getting, yes, it's a much better way of working than blank canvas, come back with something.
Just go do something,
do your magic.
Yeah.
You know.
Okay.
And inevitably, you know, this thing, it's so subjective, isn't it? You know, all of this stuff we're talking about, any design stuff is always subjective. So, you know, having that clear planning, having those clear objectives does kind of narrow down the subjectivity a little bit in terms of, you know, the chance of success. So improving the chance of success.
And would you, in that pre-planning and when you're getting the sign-off and the briefing, do you make sure that everybody's agreed the audience? Because I've seen it before where, you know, the audience isn't always the senior marketing team leadership, is it? Right. And it's really important actually to satisfy the user, not necessarily, you know, I famously had a situation with a presentation where the senior marketing leadership team, when I don't get it, and it was like, well, that's great because you're not 18 to 24 trendy people.
There you go.
So
when you go fishing, you don't bait the hook with what you like, you bait it with what the fish like.
There you go.
Yeah,
much better analogy.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
So moving on. So we've got the design. That's all getting nailed. Technically, what leads to success there, other than obviously all the pre-plan you've done?
You mean from the actual dev?
Yeah. Now we start building. What makes sure?
I think the biggest thing there is the iterative approach. So you don't just go right, kick-off meeting start, and then we'll see you in 3 months and show your website.
Right.
You got, and we obviously have milestones in that that period, but it's the client has to be involved at every stage and regularly. I mean, I'm a fan of probably weekly calls during that build stage. You know, just checking in. So it's nothing comes as a surprise. If they see things they don't like, they say early on. Right. Don't go and design 20 different page templates or develop
also,
20
and start
page
building
templates
them.
Building them rather. Yeah. And they pick up on something they don't like. You know, because one thing taking a flat design and then bringing it into a website, there'll be things that will be slightly different.
Bringing it to life.
You're bringing it to life, and let's make sure that we are doing it in an iterative approach so that, you know, one step at a time, getting things signed off. And that's where all the planning starts to pay dividends, because you've got your Gantt chart, you've got your timeline, and then you're sticking to that. And if things do, you know, move around or have to adjust, we have to adjust accordingly. But again, you're keeping it on track, and the most important thing, on budget, you know.
Okay, I'm going to take us to what I think is, certainly when I've been involved in some web builds, sometimes the thing that gets underestimated the most, content.
Yes, yeah.
So how do you ensure success in the web project when it comes to that?
That
big thing called content, which...
and like I say, a lot of these sites, you know, you're migrating content, aren't you? You're generally speaking, you're taking an existing site and you're looking to improve it, and that involves probably migrating wholesale content onto a new site. But a lot of that content will be outdated, a lot of that content will be no longer relevant, isn't really performing, isn't doing a good job. So, you know, part of that pre-build stuff of when we're talking about looking at SEO and understanding that, auditing the content, that's
so you're actually auditing content at pre-build stage, so that then you know what's got to be rewritten, what's got to be edited, and what's brand new.
And who's doing that?
Okay.
You know, because
so you'd actually set that up in the pre-build stage. This is who's doing it.
And that would feature in the Gantt chart. So then the timeline, as we come, right, now it's time to start agreeing that and getting the content that we need. We obviously have identified which content we're bringing across. But I mean, that's a huge part. And I have been aware of more than one project where perhaps, you know, the scale of the content was overlooked, you know, which is why we always crawl the site, always crawl the existing site. Because there may be, you don't just look at the navigation and go, there's, you know,
50 pages.
50 pages, that's it.
Yeah.
No. There's tons of pages. As we know, there's hundreds, if not thousands of pages potentially in a site. And you've got to factor in the time involved in migrating that content and then implementing it on the new site. So it's a huge part of the build.
Okay, so what else from that point? Where do you go from there?
Other things, I think the biggest thing to consider in terms of making that project a success is controlling the creep. I think that's a big thing. I think that's where a lot of web projects go sideways or downwards, is that, you know, they go way beyond what was originally agreed, perhaps, or things take a whole new direction and additional work comes in from somewhere. And the creep of the project, the scope of the project really creeps.
Yeah, we've always seen that. Oh, we had this idea, kind of
Yeah,
thing.
exactly.
So how'd you do that?
Signing off, the milestones, that's really critical. Again, it goes back to the start, really, the planning. As long as that's all in line and the designs have then been agreed and signed off, and then
Technical specifications, functional specifications.
all of that stuff is signed off at the start, then that's agreed. That is what we're delivering. Things change and other things may come in, but then if there are going to be significant changes, not just a little bit of creep, then we need to requote. We need to understand the change in the timeline, the change in the requirements and the budget. So that's really critical. And then just controlling the creep on a day-to-day or week-to-week basis comes back down to the Gantt chart. Controlling, making sure we are hitting those milestones, getting those things done by the time the time we've allocated, and generally controlling the scope of the project.
Okay, so you can have a degree of flexibility. You're not like rigid. It's not written down.
No,
but
exactly.
what you're saying is
Absolutely.
that you're proactively managing to make sure that things coming in are dealt with within the framework of what's been previously agreed.
I mean, there's always changes. There's always little additions and things that come out during the process. And of course, we're not the type of agency that will charge for every single thing. That's not our style. We will always accommodate where possible. But if there's going to be significant changes, you've got to kind of say, well, that's beyond what was agreed. So controlling that and keeping things on track and in line with the budget and the scope of the project is absolutely critical.
And those marketing leaders listening, watching, they're thinking, okay, well, from their viewpoint, it's like, don't push too hard, don't move the if they've agreed something for the project, don't then add 25% to that because they've got an idea. Get this project done, and then add the next level onto that, and then make that work. Okay,
absolutely. I mean, I think I always say to the clients we're working with, a website's never finished. It's ever evolving, and so this project, we'll get to a launch and we'll launch a site, but that doesn't mean it's finished. Exactly, other phases, other additions that can all come in the future. So and I think the other big thing around setting yourself up for success when it comes to web builds is following the process.
Right,
having that process, and we're very process driven, but there's reason behind that, and those processes have evolved over many years, and they continue to evolve and improve. But absolutely, with the web build, it's all the little things that you can quite easily miss that I think ultimately comes back to bite you because you haven't covered some of the basics. Everyone thinks about website and you think about the gleaming homepage and the mega menu and the whatever, all the nice looking pictures and all that sort of stuff. But it's getting all the basics right. It's getting all that, the SEO, all the optimizations, thinking about page speed, thinking about optimizing those the images, etc., etc. All those things, they're all in a list, all in a process that you're following alongside.
So you literally, Innovation Visual has a process and it has every single one of those tiny granular items in it.
Yeah, absolutely. Privacy policy, cookie policy, all this stuff. GDPR compliance, all the fun stuff, That's all in there. That's all in that process.
Yeah.
Make sure we're ticking all those boxes, because there's nothing worse than down the line, you might launch it, everyone's kind of happy because it all looks gleaming, but then there's lots of things that are coming to light. They come to say, we haven't done, and why haven't we done that? And so it ends up being an unsuccessful project, So following the process, absolutely critical to success.
Yeah, well, we've seen that. We've had to pick up for people that have become clients because they've walked in the door after these things and basically signed off a beautiful looking site, and then when the hood's been lifted, they've realised that actually it's harming their digital presence,
exactly,
isn't it? Not enhancing it. So
okay,
so lots of process, and I suppose from the viewpoint of marketing leadership, they won't have a process themselves because this is going to be a relatively infrequent thing. But part of that agency selection process should be walk us through your process. Let me see your process. And if you've got an agency that are all we're all about the flowing lines and the beautiful colours. No process. That it's not going to end nicely, kind of thing.
No, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Critical. Follow the process, trust the process. And
okay.
You set yourself up for success.
Okay. And then on the setup to success, I've seen launches from other people go very bad. I was so pleased that the success we've had with some of these recent sites in terms of smooth launches. But launch, man, that is nail biting for marketing leaders sometimes with a new website. So tell me about how you make sure that the launch is a success.
Yeah, I think there's a few things there. I think time of launch, got to think about that. You know, some people just think, oh, Monday morning, there's a new website. Well, let's have a look at the data.
Or last thing on Friday afternoon.
Oh, yeah, the worst time of all. Yeah. Don't do it on Friday afternoon, because what if there's an issue, you're running into a weekend? Yeah, don't do that. So yeah, thinking about when you do it, look at your data, look at when are low time for traffic, especially if you're an e-commerce site, you don't want to have launching a site in the middle of a peak period of business. So think about that, absolutely critical. Again, have a process, have that checklist, make sure that you're set up and have a launch plan that everybody is aware of and aligned with, clients happy, the devs are happy, everybody's, the project manager happy, that when it's going to happen and how it's going to happen. Things like DNS is, you're in the lap of the gods there. DNS settings have to be updated. You've got to wait for that to update, and that will change, propagate around the world, and you've got to allow for some lag. But it's much quicker now.
I was going to say, I remember back in the day when I used to do like late 90s or whatever, and it was like 24 to 40, 24 to 48 hours, and now it's like people are like, but it's been 4 hours, and somebody in San Francisco is still seeing the old site.
But there's, again, specifically for e-commerce sites, it's more of a UX or a user journey experience thing that you don't want to interrupt that. What if you're midway through a purchase and suddenly, the site's changing, or there's some issues. So think putting up a maintenance page on the existing site as you launch, because then that's going to prevent anybody being on the site as their DNS, their updates, the DNS updates and their view changes.
So that's why it's better to plan it and say, okay, we're going to do this 11 p.m. on a Wednesday, because that way in the period of time, this is your lowest sales period, and therefore. And then, the other thing for us is pre-launch and post-launch checks. You've got to do that. So run the checks on the staging site. You're checking for any broken links and any issues from an SEO perspective, such as 404 pages, etc. You're looking through that and iron out all those problems before you launch. On the staging server.
Absolutely.
Right.
Make sure the staging site is tickety-boo before you launch. And then equally, once you do launch, do the post-launch checks as well. So you're running the crawl of the site, you're looking for any issues that have occurred during the launch. Redirects are probably the most important thing. So getting the 301 redirects in place. Yeah.
Although I think the most famous one was a guy who used to be a client who had got another agency to launch a site, phoned up and said, like, the rankings have dropped. We've had this new site, and their post-launch check hadn't taken the no index tag off.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah. Now, so that's in the process. So we laugh about that.
Yes.
Again, it's because it's in the process. That's why surgeons have a checklist. They have a process because somebody could forget it along the way. It does sound like glaringly obvious, but it's where people fall down.
That's the thing with websites. There's a lot of moving parts, isn't there? There's a lot of things to think about and remember, and there's a lot of stakeholders and people involved. And you've got to think about these things.
And tracking and forms. Yes. Things like that.
Test submissions. Absolutely.
And testing your tracking, because you don't want to launch and then find that actually you're double counting data. Double counting conversions or not counting certain pages and things like that.
And our belt and braces approach is, we test those things on the staging site, but also test them on the live site. And it's that sort of thing that as well. Setting yourself up for success, making a successful build is just that thorough approach and making sure we are doing that each and every time. So it's those things that I think are key, and touch wood, so far so good.
Well, it's been good recently. Really good. Let's hope we haven't tempted fate too much by doing this DMA. But I think it's a really interesting and just from the recap for people listening. It seems very much like it's getting the boring stuff right is what delivers the success. It's the massive amount of pre-planning and before anybody starts building, designing, any of that whole phase is so important. Documentation, written down agreements, sign-offs and all of that.
Work to the plan and the plan will work.
And then the thoroughness of going through, having a proven, granular process and just working through it and making it be delivered. Because I suppose the defining factor for success with so many agencies and people building websites is that it's not down to the quality of your code. That's a given. Everybody can do good code. It's actually the quality of the project and the execution around
And I think
that.
also on the process of it, it's being agile enough and flexible enough to adjust and tailor it to the individual project. You know, you might have the process, but you've got to flex because, you know, maybe they've got a huge customer database that's, you know, it's hosted on the site, and we've got to have that in. We've got to, you know, we're hooking up to HubSpot and we're making those, that sort of stuff, making sure the integration is running, all of those sorts of things. You've got to factor that into, you know, that particular site. So making sure those things are all factored into the process, and then, you know, delivering it as part of the build.
Yeah. Okay. So tailored process, loads of planning, thorough.
Yeah. Testing,
lots of comms as well. You were talking about earlier on, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Being really clear in the comms and having the stakeholders, all the stakeholders involved from day one. You know, that's really key.
Okay. Excellent. Well, that's really good, and I think Pop is now snoring in the background, so she's finding it interesting. But hopefully, you guys watching have found it really interesting. Please do like and subscribe. Click that notifications bell. Leave us some comments as well of what you think and successful web build projects you've been involved with. And catch you on the next Digital Marketing Answered. Thanks for watching or listening.